Mary Vilakazi. Man, it's we're coming to the end of Davos. I did ask you if we could talk on Thursday.
Yes.
So I'm sure you've learnt a lot, but I've got to start with your colleague, Sam Moss. She's asked me to write a piece for Perspectives about, is the World Economic Forum or is Davos even worth having anymore? Now, you've been here the last few days. Can you answer that question for me? Sorry, we've got to introduce you first.
Yes, okay.
Mary is effectively number 2 at FirstRand. Could I put it that way?
We can say Group Chief Operating Officer.
Okay, so not quite number 1, but but it's Africa's biggest financial services.
Correct,
Okay.
by market cap.
Right. So the question.
So thank you very much for this time, Alec. I looked at Prof. Klaus, and when he gave his address, he's 84 years old, and what was going through my mind was, what happens after he goes? I haven't actually considered the World Economic Forum without him. So I think coming back to whether is it still worth having, I think when the world is actually moving really, I think, further and further apart. The themes of deglobalization and the geopolitical tensions, I think the outcome of all of that is really countries going back to trying and doing their own thing. So I think, if anything, this is probably a time where it's worthwhile having global forums, global platforms that bring different people together. I think there's obviously some tangible things that get done at Davos. People come here to conclude some agreements, we build new relationships. I think you listen. There's a lot of listening, and I think that's invaluable. So I would have probably have hesitated and thought a little bit hard about whether actually you need to pay so much money to be here. But I think the opportunity to have people coming from civil society, business, government, central banks, young people actually, because that's also what the World Economic Forum do. These young global leaders, shapers, they do some really interesting work, and I think it's just valuable having a platform where people can actually interact. And
a forum.
Yeah, a forum. So
it's a forum, isn't it? It's so interesting, FirstRand, because my journey with FirstRand and the World Economic Forum has gone a long way back. Larry Dippenaar, he was CEO, then he was chairman, and I remember him telling me that you've installed a system where it's not the same person who comes every year. How does that work, and why?
So that's interesting, because I'm the only one who's here representing FirstRand, and some of the local banks, they've got the chairman and 2 other people that are here. So they keep asking me who is Roger, for instance. I think some of them even probably come close to asking where's Laurie. So we alternate. I guess that's always worked. You go back and then you share what you've learned, and I think what were the striking themes when one gets back. Last year, Harry, a financial director, came, and the year before that was Roger. I think Roger's coming next year. So this works for us.
So the chairman comes every 3 years.
Yes. I think there's an alternate, but sometimes the schedules for different reasons. But I think we try and just give each other an opportunity to just be here.
So you're going to have to now. I remember again going back ancient history when Larry Dippenaar was still with the group before he retired. We used to do a breakfast.
Yes.
After he was here.
Yes.
And that was a lot of fun, because you'd get some clients around and he's just such a good presenter. It's such fun. That it really was, there were quite a few jokes. So you're going to have to start polishing up on your jokes, I think, for your breakfast when you get back.
So, we haven't actually hosted that breakfast for a while, but we should actually really bring it back, because I attended as a client when I was the finance director at MMI at the time, and I remember being invited to one of those breakfasts. So I will take that back and have a discussion with Emery Brown, who's the CEO of RMB now, to just reignite that. But we actually don't have any planned events around this. But I think we'll pick it up for next year.
But internally, internally for personal, you learn a lot, I presume, from this. and that you'll be able to share with your colleagues. So what are you going to say to Sam when she asks you the question she asked me? What exactly have you learned here? How's it changed your thinking on things?
So when we go back, I think certainly we share with the various excos, and I think depending on the timing, we'll also share some of what came out or what we thought was insightful from Davos, also with the board. The board also pays a lot of attention. So at least there is a return in terms of information sharing. But I think what for me was interesting, I think as a theme overall for Davos, is that when I looked at the agenda, it was very noticeable that Africa's participation was much less than it used to be in the past. I mean, obviously you've covered a lot more of these Davos sessions, so you can give your perspective. Yeah. So I think that's already number one, a big risk, because the most topical items, at least the items that featured the most, were about climate change, were about nature. So it's a risk, I guess, if Africa is not at the table where climate change and solutions to climate change and climate adaptation strategies are being discussed, because we know that also goes with funding. So that's one that I think African leaders actually need to take a serious note of. Of course, there are lots of other forums. It's not just the World Economic Forum, but this is a proxy of the discussions that take place. So that's a concern.
Just a quick insert there. There are a lot of people who are still skeptics about climate change. Please don't be. The argument is not how much climate change is happening because of man. The argument is that climate is changing. Everyone agrees with that. Yes. Everyone agrees. The science is pretty compelling on that. Now, it might be a long-term thing that's going through history, and might be because we're putting too much carbon in the air, whatever. The reality is it's changing, and it's going to change sea levels and the way we live. That we can see it around us, can't we? It's just getting hotter in certain places. It's getting colder. We're getting more floods, etc. So that's kind of done. But I love what you've said now. If Africa's not at the table, because Africa's being less developed is most vulnerable, perhaps, to these changes.
No, absolutely, Alex. So one is we saw it in KZN with the floods. So I think we've seen in Mozambique. So I think the science is clear, and the effects. We have an opportunity when something happens, we can go somewhere else. You can get a warning about what's going to happen, but for poor people, who actually at the best of times, I think that structure that they live in is not as protected. We know that I think the effects are really felt most by the poor. And I think even just the fact that development on the continent is still far behind. I think we have to make sure that we are at the table to try and secure solutions for people in the African continent. But also even more excitedly, I think if you come back to South Africa, okay, we've got a shortage of energy, but now instead of being stuck in ideological debates around, are we going to transition from coal? What are the implications? We know the challenges, appreciate the challenges, but now we have a shortage of electricity, but that creates an opportunity now to bring in green and clean energy. Okay, but we've been forced to be in that situation because we ended up without electricity. And I think in the same way, that there are challenges, but there are big opportunities. We've got lots of natural resources on the continent, and I think there's a lot that also we can bring to the table in being part and parcel of the solution. So that'll be really just, I think, a big takeaway for the leaders on the continent, that I think there are moments of with energy transition, there are really big opportunities here for us to lead.
And leapfrog maybe.
And leapfrog maybe, and I think also just secure the funding, because I think somebody has to pay for the transition.
On a more maybe controversial note, I've noticed at this forum that the rich north, the developed countries, kind of don't get, certainly when they arrive, they don't get the developing world. And I'll give you an example. I haven't heard anybody say, oh, we're really sorry in the north, we could print money to look after our populations during COVID when we closed the economies down, but we didn't realize that you as developing countries, if you printed money, your currencies fell off the table, so you weren't able to protect the vulnerable. And you've got more vulnerable there than you've got in the rich north. It's like that discussion wasn't even on the table. It wasn't even thought about. And I just use that as a very obvious one. But there are many other issues. But at least we're here. And at least we can put up our hands sometimes and maybe send people back when they leave the forum with a different perception, because I guess we are formed by the environment we live in.
No, absolutely, Alec. Actually, what I found valuable now, some of the sessions I attended a couple of the ones where they're workshop type of sessions, precisely to actually make input. And I was testing whether when we put forward some of the arguments, particularly from South Africa, whether there's resonance or people listen, or whether there's a glazed look and they actually go past it. But I think on 2 occasions I noticed that actually our presence here and our input is valuable, because for some of those people they haven't had to ask for a perspective from somebody from the south or from Africa. You sit in the Netherlands. So I actually sat with one of the advocates who was involved in the case against Shell, and so it was around litigation with climate change related matters. Staggering stats: about 2,000 cases on climate change are making their way in courts at the moment, over 2 years, 2,000 over 2 years, and the success rates are about 50%.
Wow.
That was staggering. So
if you're a Shell shareholder, it's
yes.
very worrying.
So I said, sure. Okay, so this is actually quite an interesting trend, and obviously as a corporate, we have to make sure that our policies and our practices and what we say and I think what we do, we need to consider all those as just part of what we do. But she was talking about that some of the cases people are taking corporate because their operating models, the implications of their operating models in 15, 20 years time are going to have dire consequences on nature, and courts are ruling that operating model they can't continue. I guess that's a bit of the Shell example, and there's increasingly more of that. So that was interesting. So I said, okay, but now do you think the continent can also make a legal case to ask the North to fund? And she said, well, there are about 4 cases at the moment that are along those lines. So litigation around climate change is going to be something interesting to watch, Alec. I think
it's fascinating. And you imagine when the asbestos miners were mining asbestos, they probably had no idea initially, or maybe a little idea when they saw people getting sick. But what was coming down the line, there are no asbestos miners anymore. And the same thing with the cigarette companies. Yes. They're also caught in litigation. Well, we've had a good chat, but let's close off with a party. Did you get to... South Africa rocked the place. Mikasa was amazing. It was lovely to see South Africa making a statement in the Congress Centre last night, and chock-a-block, lots of people coming along and seeing some, our good side, our smiley side.
Yes. No, that was actually very good, Alec, because I think the mood has been a bit depressed because we've got no electricity. And as South Africans, because we're capable of more, we are very hard on ourselves, and we need to be. But coming here, I guess the sentiment towards South Africa has shifted. I think the last time I was in Davos was 2018. And then every second person you engage with the questions were around corruption. So now, I think our central bank has also done very well, I think, in managing inflation. So I think lots of discussions around how we are generally, well set up, or at least well positioned to be able to ride through the global recession, and I think be able to emerge on the other side a lot stronger, provided we can tackle the electricity problem quite quickly, quite urgently, and I think and the ports too. But apart from those, it's been good to be part of discussions where people are looking forward and looking through the politics and wondering what else could South Africa do? Where is South Africa going to benefit from some of the supply chain changes? How are we going to position ourselves from a trade point of view? So so that's actually been quite uplifting. Amidst the discussions on Ukraine and Russia and what's happening in Europe, I think there are opportunities for South Africa if we, I think, are well organized, and I think we take the opportunities that come about from these geopolitical fallouts, because there are opportunities for us. And so it's been good to see investors looking at that and thinking about where they could come in and play. I mean, I haven't, as I said, been in discussions where people are looking through a lot of the noise in South Africa, and the party was really great. I mean, Mikasa, they did an amazing job. So it was really, really good and proud moment for South Africa to just be on the main stage here in Davos.
Again, in May we were overshadowed by Namibia and Botswana, and that's not national pride for us. Mary Vilakazi giving us some good context there on. The story used to be corruption because everybody kind of looked at you in South Africa and looked the other way. Now they know at least we're fighting corruption, but we've got other challenges like the rest of the world has got. It's been lovely talking with Mary Vilakazi, who's the Chief Operating Officer of FirstRand. I'm Alec Hogg from biznews.com.